Chapter 1. The bombshell over dinner. The restaurant smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted turkey. The kind of scent that made Carter Dullan think of Christmas mornings and family traditions. Things that had grown complicated over the years. He sat across from his daughter, Abigail, who was glowing in her graduation cap and gown. Her cheeks flushed from the December chill. Beside her, her mother, Elise, scrolled through her phone between bites of salad, her blazer still crisp from a day of meetings. Carter cleared his throat, pushing his empty coffee cup aside. "Well," he said, his voice steady. "Congratulations, kiddo. You did it." Abigail grinned, her eyes bright. "Thanks, Dad. I can't believe it's over. High school. Done." She leaned back in her chair, stretching like someone who just finished a marathon. "Next stop, college life. Local university," Carter reminded her, smiling. "Don't go getting ideas about running off to California just yet." She laughed. "Relax. I'm not abandoning you. Yet." Elise finally looked up, her expression softening. "You've grown up so fast, Abby. I swear." I blinked and you went from finger painting to programming classes. "Yeah," Carter said, his fingers drumming on the table. He felt the weight of what he was about to say pressing against his ribs. He'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, imagining her reaction, bracing for it. "Speaking of growing up," Abigail tilted her head. "Oh, that tone sounds like a lecture." "Not a lecture," Carter said, lifting his hands in mock surrender. "Just an announcement." Elise arched a brow. "Should I be worried?" "Depends," Carter said, his mouth corking into a grin. "Abby, you're 18 now, officially an adult, which means it's time for you to take responsibility for your own life." Abigail blinked. "Okay?" He leaned forward, his voice calm, deliberate. "So, as your graduation gift, you're moving out." The silence that followed was so sharp it could have sliced through the holiday music playing overhead. Abigail's jaw dropped. Elise froze, her fork suspended midair. "What?" Abigail squeaked. "You heard me," Carter said, keeping his face straight even as laughter bubbled in his chest. "You're moving out. Time to spread those wings." "Dad." Abigail's voice shot up an octave. "Are you serious? Where am I supposed to go? I don't have money for an apartment." Relax," Carter chuckled, holding up his hands. "I'm not tossing you on the street. I've got a plan." Elise set her fork down, eyes narrowing. "Carter." He grinned, unable to hold back anymore. "I'm renovating the garage, turning it into your own little starter home. Bedroom upstairs, kitchen downstairs, the works. You'll have your own space, but still be close enough if you need me." Abigail stared at him, her panic melting into confusion, then dawning realization. "Wait, you're serious?" "Dead serious," Carter said. "Been planning it for months." For a heartbeat, Abigail just sat there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then she laughed, a bright, startled sound that made heads turn at nearby tables. "You jerk. You scared me half to death." Elise laughed too, shaking her head. "Carter, you could have led with that." "Where's the fun in that?" he said, grinning. Abigail leaned forward, her eyes shining now. "You're really doing this? Like, a whole house?" "Not a mansion," Carter said, "but enough to get you started. A place that's yours." Her smile faltered for just a second, and Carter saw the flicker of something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or the weight of change pressing in. He felt it too, deep in his chest. This was the beginning of something big, for both of them. Elise reached across the table, squeezing Abigail's hand. "I love it, and I'll help. Money, decorating, whatever you need." Abigail laughed again, a little shakier this time. "Wow, okay, guess I'm moving out." Carter raised his glass of water in a toast. "To adulthood." Abigail clinked her glass against his, her grin returning. "To adulthood." And just like that, the plan was in motion. Chapter 2. Blueprints and banter. The next morning, Carter stood in the garage with a steaming mug of coffee, staring at the space that would soon become Abigail's first home. The concrete floor was cold under his boots, and the walls smelled faintly of motor oil and sawdust, a scent that had been his companion for years. He could already see it in his mind. Drywall, polished wood floors, a staircase leading to a cozy loft bedroom. It was ambitious, sure, but ambition was what made life interesting. The overhead door rattled, and Abigail stepped inside, bundled in a thick sweater, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked around, her breath puffing in the chilly air. "So, this is it?" "This is it," Carter said, spreading his arms like a magician revealing a trick. "Your future palace." Abigail snorted. "Palace? Dad, it's a garage." "Not for long." He handed her a folded sheet of paper. "Blueprints." She unfolded it, her brows lifting as she scanned the sketch. "Wow, you've been planning this for a while." 6 months, Carter said, pride warming his voice. 2 floors, bedroom and living space upstairs, kitchen and office downstairs, bathroom tucked in the corner, laundry near the back. Abigail traced the lines with her finger. "This is actually amazing." "Glad you think so," Carter said. "Because you're helping." Her head snapped up. "Helping? As in?" As in learning how to swing a hammer, patch drywall, install flooring. You want independence? It starts with knowing how to fix your own sink. Abigail groaned dramatically. Dad, I'm a programmer, not a carpenter. Then consider this your crash course in real-world coding, Carter said, grinning. Except the bugs are nails and the syntax is power tools. She laughed, shaking her head. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously right, he said. Grab those gloves. We're starting with clearing this junk out. Abigail eyed the clutter. Old paint cans, a rusted lawnmower, boxes of Christmas decorations, and sighed. This is going to take forever. Forever starts now, Carter said, tossing her a pair of work gloves. As they worked, the garage slowly transformed from a storage graveyard into a blank canvas. Abigail dragged boxes to the driveway, muttering under her breath about manual labor, while Carter hauled the heavier stuff with practiced ease. Every so often, he caught her smiling when she thought he wasn't looking, and it made his chest tighten in that bittersweet way only fathers know, the way that says time is moving too fast. By noon, they were sitting on the tailgate of Carter's truck, eating sandwiches and sipping sodas. Abigail wiped sweat from her forehead, her cheeks flushed. Okay, she said. I'll admit, this feels kind of good. Told you, Carter said. Nothing like hard work to make lunch taste better. She grinned. So what's next? Framing, Carter said. We'll start tomorrow. I've got lumber coming in. Abigail leaned back, looking at the garage with new eyes. You know, this is kind of exciting. Kind of, Carter teased. Kid, this is the start of your empire. She laughed, tossing a chip at him. You're impossible. Get used to it, he said, smiling. We've got a lot of work ahead. And as he watched her laugh, Carter felt something shift inside him. A quiet certainty that this project wasn't just about building walls. It was about building a future one nail at a time. Chapter 3. A chance encounter among lumber. The bell above the hardware store door jingled as Carter stepped inside, the December air clinging to his jacket. The place smelled like cedar and fresh paint, a scent that always made him feel at home. He adjusted his cap and scanned the aisles, mentally ticking off his list. Lumber, nails, insulation, and maybe a new drill bit if he could justify the splurge. He wasn't expecting anyone to notice him. He was just another guy in work boots, picking up supplies. But then he saw her. She was standing near the paint samples, holding two swatches up to the light, one a soft cream, the other a bold teal. Her hair was tucked under a knit hat, and her cheeks were pink from the cold. She looked, well, like trouble. The good kind. Carter told himself to keep walking. He had a project to finish, a daughter to teach, a life that didn't have room for distractions. But as he passed the aisle, she glanced up and smiled. A quick, warm smile that hit him like a nail gun to the chest. Excuse me, she said, stepping closer. Do you know anything about paint? Carter blinked. A little. Why? She held up the swatches. I'm trying to pick a color for my kitchen. Cream feels safe, teal feels fun. But I don't want it to look like a circus. Carter chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, cream's classic. Teal's bold. Depends on what you want your kitchen to say. She tilted her head, amused. What does your kitchen say? That I'm a carpenter who eats standing up, Carter said, grinning. She laughed. A bright, easy sound that made something in him loosen. Fair enough. He nodded toward the teal. Go with that one. Life's too short for safe. Her smile widened. You sound like someone who knows a thing or two about taking risks. Sometimes, Carter said. Mostly with wood, not paint. She laughed again, then extended her hand. I'm Meredith. Carter, he said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, warm. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too, Meredith said. Thanks for the advice. No problem, Carter said, forcing himself to step back before he forgot why he was here. Good luck with the circus. She grinned. I'll send you tickets. As Carter walked toward the lumber section, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A spark, small but undeniable. He shook his head, trying to focus on the task at hand. Nails, insulation, drill bit, not teal paint, and a smile that could undo a man. But as he loaded boards onto the cart, he caught himself glancing toward the paint aisle, hoping for another glimpse. And when he saw Meredith chatting with a clerk, laughing at something, he knew this wasn't just a random encounter. It felt like the start of something he hadn't planned for, but maybe needed more than he realized. Chapter 4. Coffee, Sawdust, and Serendipity. By the time Carter finished hauling the last stack of lumber into the garage, his shoulders ached and his hands were raw from the cold. December had a way of biting through even the thickest gloves, and today was no exception. He wiped his brow with the back of his sleeve and glanced at Abigail, who was perched on a stool, scrolling through her phone like the queen of procrastination. You planning to help? Carter asked. Or just supervise? Abigail looked up, grinning. Supervising is a critical role. Someone has to make sure you don't build me a crooked house. Carter snorted. Kid, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Exactly, she said, hopping off the stool. You're old. You might need guidance. He laughed, shaking his head. Grab that measuring tape before I revoke your lunch privileges. She saluted dramatically and went to work, her teasing making the long hours feel lighter. They spent the morning marking out the frame, Carter explaining why every inch mattered, while Abigail pretended to take notes on her phone. By noon, the garage looked less like a storage unit and more like the skeleton of a home. When Carter's stomach growled loud enough to echo, he decided it was time for a break. Coffee run, he announced. You want anything? Hot chocolate, Abigail said, peeling off her gloves. Extra whipped cream. Got it. Carter grabbed his jacket and keys, heading for the truck. The local coffee shop was only 10 minutes away, a cozy little place with twinkling lights in the windows and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. He pushed through the door, the warmth hitting him like a hug, and then he saw her. Meredith was at the counter, laughing with the barista as she balanced a tray of pastries. Her knit hat was gone, replaced by a cascade of chestnut hair that caught the light like polished wood. Carter froze for half a second, then forced himself to move forward, telling himself this was coincidence. Just coincidence. She turned, and her eyes lit up. Carter. Hey, Meredith, he said, smiling despite himself. Small town, huh? Very, she said, stepping aside so he could order. What brings you here? Coffee, Carter said, then added, and hot chocolate. For my daughter. Meredith's smile softened. That's sweet. She's supervising my latest project, Carter said, handing the barista his order. Turning my garage into a starter home for her. Meredith's eyebrows lifted. Wow, that's ambitious. Some people buy cars for graduation, Carter said with a shrug. I build houses. She laughed, and Carter felt that spark again. Warm, unexpected, dangerous in the best way. Sounds like you're a pretty great dad. Trying, he said. What about you? Kitchen circus coming along. Meredith grinned. I bought the teal paint. Took your advice. Bold choice, Carter said. I approve. Good, she said, then hesitated. Listen, I'm hosting a little holiday get-together next weekend. Nothing fancy, just neighbors, cookies, bad Christmas music. You should come. Carter blinked. Me? Yeah, Meredith said, her tone casual but her eyes bright. Bring your daughter if you want. It'll be fun. He felt something stir, a mix of surprise and something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Sure, he said, trying not to sound like a teenager. I'd like that. Great, Meredith said, handing him a napkin with an address scribbled on it. Saturday, 7. Carter tucked it into his jacket, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. I'll be there. As he walked back to the truck, coffee in hand and heart thudding like a drum, Carter realized something. This Christmas was shaping up to be a lot more interesting than he'd planned. Chapter 5. Sawdust and Secrets. The rhythmic thud of Carter's hammer echoed through the garage as sunlight streamed through the open door, catching dust motes in the air like tiny sparks. The frame was up now, bare bones of walls that hinted at rooms to come. Abigail stood nearby, holding a level with exaggerated seriousness. Perfectly straight, she announced, squinting at the bubble. You might actually know what you're doing. Carter smirked. High praise from someone who thought a Phillips head was a brand of toothpaste. Abigail rolled her eyes. I'm learning, slowly. Mostly because you keep making me redo everything. That's called quality control, Carter said, driving another nail home. You'll thank me when your shelves don't collapse. She leaned against a stud, arms crossed. So, when were you planning to tell me? Tell you what? Carter asked, not looking up. That you ran into Meredith at the coffee shop, Abigail said, her tone casual but her grin anything but. Carter froze mid-swing. How do you? Small town, Abigail said, smirking. News travels fast. Plus, you left the napkin with her address on the counter. Smooth move, Dad. Carter groaned, setting the hammer down. It's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, Abigail said, eyes dancing. You like her. I don't. Carter started, then stopped. Lying to his daughter felt like trying to nail water to a wall. Okay, maybe I like her. A little. Abigail grinned like a cat with cream. This is amazing. Dad's got a crush. Kid? Carter warned, pointing the hammer at her. Don't start. Too late, she said, laughing. So, are you going to her party? Yes, Carter said, picking up the hammer again. And you're coming with me. Obviously, Abigail said. Someone has to make sure you don't embarrass yourself. Carter shook his head, smiling despite himself. You're impossible. Runs in the family, she said, grabbing a handful of nails. Now teach me how to use that saw before I tell Meredith you're secretly terrified of teal paint. Carter chuckled, handing her the safety goggles. Fine, but if you cut off a finger, don't blame me. As Abigail positioned the board and Carter guided her hands, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, amusement, and something deeper. Something that tugged at him when he thought of Meredith's smile. He hadn't planned on this. Romance, parties, the possibility of something new. But maybe life was reminding him that plans were just blueprints. The real building happened in the unexpected moments. And as the saw roared to life, Carter realized this Christmas was shaping up to be more than a season of giving. It was a season of beginnings. Chapter 6. The Party and the Spark. Snowflakes drifted lazily under the glow of streetlights as Carter pulled into Meredith's driveway, the truck tires crunching over a thin layer of frost. The house was warm and inviting, its windows glowing with golden light and garlands twinkling like stars. Christmas music floated faintly through the air, cheerful, slightly off-key carols that made Carter smile despite the knot in his stomach. Beside him, Abigail adjusted her scarf and shot him a look. "You nervous?" "No," Carter said, a little too quickly. Abigail grinned. "You're totally nervous, kid," he muttered, shutting off the engine. "Don't start." "Oh, I'm starting," she said, hopping out of the truck. "This is going to be fun." Carter followed her up the walkway, his boots crunching on the icy path. He wasn't sure what to expect. He hadn't been to a holiday party in years, not since before the divorce. Back then, Elise had handled the social stuff while he stuck to the sidelines. Tonight, there was no hiding behind anyone. Tonight, he was walking straight into the unknown. Meredith opened the door before they could knock, her smile bright enough to rival the Christmas lights. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it," Carter said, his voice steadier than he felt. Come in," Meredith said, ushering them inside. The warmth hit him like a wave, carrying the scent of cinnamon and pine. The living room was cozy, filled with neighbors chatting over mugs of cider, a tree glittering in the corner with ornaments that looked like they had stories to tell. Abigail slipped off her coat and whispered, "Nice place," before disappearing toward the snack table like a heat-seeking missile. Carter chuckled, then turned back to Meredith. "Looks great," he said, taking in the decorations. "You did all this?" "Guilty," Meredith said, laughing. "I go a little overboard at Christmas." "Overboard's underrated," Carter said, smiling. "Better than underboard." She laughed again, and Carter felt that spark, the one that had been flickering since the hardware store, flare a little brighter. Meredith led him toward the kitchen, where platters of cookies and bowls of punch waited like cheerful soldiers. "So," she said, handing him a mug of cider, "how's the garage project?" "Coming along," Carter said, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "Framing's done. Next up, insulation and drywall." "Impressive," Meredith said. "You really weren't kidding about building a house." "Not my first rodeo," Carter said. "But teaching Abigail? That's new." Meredith smiled. "She seems great." "She is," Carter said, his voice softening. "Smart, stubborn, keeps me on my toes." Meredith's eyes warmed. "Sounds like her dad." Carter chuckled, feeling heat creep up his neck. Before he could reply, someone cranked up the music, a jazzy version of Jingle Bell Rock, and a few guests started dancing in the living room. Meredith glanced toward them, then back at Carter with a mischievous glint. "Dance?" she asked. Carter blinked. "Me? Yes, you," Meredith said, holding out her hand. "Come on. It's Christmas." For a second, Carter hesitated. He wasn't a dancer. He was a builder, a fixer, a man who felt more at home with a hammer than a dance floor. But then he saw the way Meredith's eyes sparkled, and something inside him said, "Why not?" He set down his mug and took her hand. The music swelled, and they moved into the living room, weaving between laughing neighbors. Carter's steps were awkward at first, but Meredith's easy grace pulled him along, her laughter soft and warm against the backdrop of carols. For a moment, the world narrowed to her smile, her hand in his, the glow of Christmas lights painting everything in gold. And just like that, Carter realized something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the cautious kind, but the kind that made you believe in second chances, in new beginnings, even in the middle of winter. When the song ended, Meredith squeezed his hand gently. "Not bad," she teased. "Not bad for a carpenter," Carter said, grinning. "Not bad for anyone," she said, her voice soft, her eyes lingering on his. And in that look, Carter felt the spark turn into something steady, something real. Chapter 7. Snags and Signals. The morning after the party, Carter woke to the sound of Abigail humming Christmas tunes in the kitchen, a sure sign she was in a good mood, which usually meant trouble for him. He shuffled in, still half asleep, and found her flipping pancakes like a pro. "Morning, old man," she said, grinning. "Sleep well." "Fine," Carter muttered, reaching for the coffee pot. "Why?" "Oh, no reason," Abigail said, her tone dripping with mischief. "Except you danced last night." Carter groaned. "Kid. And not just danced," she continued, piling pancakes onto a plate. "You smiled. You laughed. You looked happy." Carter poured his coffee, trying to ignore the heat creeping up his neck. "It was a party." "It was Meredith," Abigail said, sliding the plate toward him. "You like her." Carter took a long sip of coffee. "Eat your breakfast." Abigail smirked. "Fine. But just so you know, I fully support this. Meredith seems great." Carter shook his head, hiding a smile. "You're impossible. Runs in the family," she said, biting into a pancake. After breakfast, they headed to the garage, ready to tackle insulation. Carter had the rolls stacked neatly, the tools lined up like soldiers. Everything was going smoothly until it wasn't. The first snag came when Carter realized the wiring behind the walls was older than he thought. Great, he muttered, staring at the tangled mess. This is going to take hours. Abigail peered over his shoulder. Can't you just, I don't know, tape it? Carter shot her a look. Kid, this isn't a laptop. You don't just tape it. She grinned. So what now? Now, Carter said, rubbing his jaw. I call in reinforcements, which was how, an hour later, Carter found himself scrolling through his contacts, hesitating over Meredith's name. She'd mentioned her brother was an electrician at the party. It was a long shot but worth asking. He took a breath and hit call. Carter. Meredith's voice was warm, cheerful. Hey. Hey, Carter said, trying to sound casual. Quick question. Your brother still do electrical work? He does, Meredith said. Why? Garage project hit a snag, Carter said. Wiring's a mess. I could use a pro. No problem, Meredith said. I'll give him your number. And, if you need an extra pair of hands for anything else, I'm free this afternoon. Carter blinked. You'd help? Sure, Meredith said, laughing. I'm not afraid of a little sawdust. Carter felt that spark again, steady and warm. Okay, he said. If you're sure. I'm sure, Meredith said. Text me the address. When Carter hung up, Abigail was grinning like a cat with cream. She's coming here? Don't start, Carter warned. Oh, I'm starting, Abigail said, laughing. This is going to be fun. Carter shook his head, but inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A mix of nerves and anticipation. The garage was turning into more than a project. It was turning into a crossroads, where sawdust and second chances met under the glow of Christmas lights. Chapter 8. Sawdust and Second Chances. By mid-afternoon, the garage smelled like fresh lumber and ambition. Carter had cleared a space near the workbench, trying to make the chaos look less chaotic. He told himself it was for safety, but deep down, he knew it was because Meredith was coming. He hadn't felt this kind of nervous energy in years, not since his first date with Elise, back when life was simpler and his hair had fewer gray streaks. Abigail was perched on the stairs to the loft, swinging her legs and grinning like she knew every thought in his head. You cleaned, she said, her tone teasing. For Meredith. I cleaned, Carter said evenly. Because I don't want anyone tripping over a saw. Sure, Abigail said, smirking. And the shirt? That's not your usual garage chic. Carter glanced down at his flannel, new, crisp, not the faded one he usually wore. It's warm, he said, grabbing a tape measure to avoid eye contact. Before Abigail could fire back, a car pulled into the driveway. Meredith stepped out, bundled in a cream coat, her hair catching the winter light like polished chestnut. She carried a tote bag and wore a smile that made Carter's pulse skip. Hey, she called, walking up the drive. Hope I'm not late. Right on time, Carter said, meeting her halfway. Thanks for coming. Happy to help, Meredith said, stepping inside the garage and looking around. Wow, this is impressive. Still a work in progress, Carter said, rubbing the back of his neck. But we're getting there. Abigail hopped down from the stairs, grinning. Hi, Meredith. Dad's been talking about you all morning. Carter shot her a look that could have bent nails. Abigail just winked and sauntered off to organize screws, humming jingle bells like a soundtrack to his humiliation. Meredith laughed softly. She's great. She's something, Carter said, smiling despite himself. So, you ready to get your hands dirty? Absolutely, Meredith said, pulling gloves from her tote. What's the plan? Insulation, Carter said, handing her a pair of goggles. Not glamorous, but necessary. They worked side by side, cutting and fitting insulation into the framed walls. Meredith wasn't afraid to dive in, her hands steady, her movements confident. Every so often, their fingers brushed as they passed tools, and each time, Carter felt that spark come through him like an electric current. So, Meredith said, pressing a sheet into place. What made you decide to do this for Abigail? Carter paused, his hammer resting against the stud. She's 18, starting college. I wanted her to have a space that's hers, a place to learn how to stand on her own. Meredith's eyes softened. That's incredible. Most parents just buy a laptop. Carter shrugged, feeling heat creep up his neck. Guess I like building things. Meredith smiled, including futures. The words hit him harder than he expected, settling deep in his chest. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the noise of the world, the hum of tools, Abigail's humming upstairs, faded into something quiet and steady. By the time they finished, the garage looked different, warmer, more alive. Meredith peeled off her gloves, brushing sawdust from her coat. This was fun, she said, smiling. You're a good teacher. Only because you're a good student, Carter said, his voice low, steady. Meredith laughed, her eyes lingering on his for a beat too long. Well, if you ever need more help, I'll call, Carter said, and he meant it. As Meredith headed for the door, Abigail appeared like a cat who'd smelled cream. Bye, Meredith, she sang, grinning. See you at the next date. Carter groaned. Meredith laughed. And as the door closed behind her, Carter realized something. This wasn't just a spark anymore. It was a flame, and it was growing. Chapter 9. Snowfall and stillness. The first flakes came like whispers, soft, tentative, drifting past the garage windows as Carter measured the last piece of drywall. By mid-afternoon, the whispers had turned into a steady hush, blanketing the driveway in white. Abigail stood at the door, her breath fogging the glass. Dad, she said, her voice tinged with awe. It's coming down hard. Carter glanced outside and frowned. The forecast had mentioned flurries, not a full-blown snowstorm. He set down his tape measure and wiped his hands on his jeans. Great, great, Abigail echoed. We're about to get snowed in. Better here than on the road, Carter said, reaching for his phone. He had one thought, Meredith. She'd mentioned running errands today. If she was out in this mess. Before he could overthink it, his phone buzzed. A text from Meredith. Snow's crazy. Power flickered twice. You okay? Carter typed back quickly. We're fine. Garage work. You safe? Her reply came fast. Safe, but my driveway's a skating rink. And my heat's acting weird. Carter stared at the screen, his gut tightening. He didn't like the idea of her alone in a freezing house. He hesitated. Was it too much to offer help? Too soon? Before he could decide, Abigail peeked over his shoulder. Go, she said simply. What? Carter blinked. Go check on her, Abigail said, grinning. You've been looking for an excuse all week. Carter opened his mouth to argue, but the truth was written all over his face. He grabbed his jacket and keys. Stay put. Don't touch the saw. Promise, Abigail said, smirking. Tell Meredith I said hi. The drive was slow, the truck crawling through streets buried in white. By the time Carter reached Meredith's house, the snow was knee-deep and the wind had teeth. He trudged up the walkway, boots crunching, and knocked on the door. Meredith opened it, bundled in a thick sweater, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Relief flickered in her eyes. Carter, you didn't have to. Couldn't let you freeze, he said, stepping inside. The house was dim, the heat barely humming. Furnace. Acting up, Meredith said, hugging herself. I called a repair guy, but he can't get here until tomorrow. Carter scanned the room, his instincts kicking in. Let me take a look. Minutes later, he was in the basement, crouched beside the stubborn furnace. Meredith hovered nearby, holding a flashlight, her breath visible in the chill. You really didn't have to come, she said softly. I wanted to, Carter said, tightening a valve. Besides, I'm good with more than wood. Meredith laughed, the sound warm despite the cold. Clearly, the fix was temporary, a patch to keep the heat running until morning. But when the vents finally sighed warm air, Meredith's smile lit up the dim basement like Christmas lights. You're a lifesaver. Just a guy with a wrench, Carter said, grinning. They climbed back upstairs, the storm raging outside, the house slowly warming. Meredith poured coffee, and they sat by the window, watching snow swirl like confetti. For a moment, the world felt still. Just two people, mugs in hand, hearts thawing in the quiet. This is nice, Meredith said softly. Yeah, Carter said, his voice low. It is. Her eyes met his, lingering, and in that look, Carter felt something shift, something steady, undeniable. The storm outside was fierce, but inside, it felt like the start of something calm, something real. Chapter 10. Christmas Eve and New Beginnings. The garage smelled faintly of pine and fresh paint, a scent that mingled with the crisp December air. Carter stood in the doorway, hands on his hips, surveying the transformation. What had once been a cluttered storage space was now a home, a small, sturdy, beautiful home. The walls gleamed, the floors shone, and the loft bedroom looked like something out of a cozy winter catalog. A tiny tree twinkled in the corner, its ornaments catching the glow of string lights draped along the railing. Abigail burst through the door, her boots crunching on the frosted driveway. Oh, my God. She stopped dead, eyes wide, mouth open. Dad, this is wow. Carter grinned, pride swelling in his chest. Welcome home, kid. She stepped inside slowly, like she was afraid to wake from a dream. Her fingers brushed the countertop, the banister, the soft throw on the couch. It's perfect, she whispered. It's mine. Yours, Carter said, his voice thick. Every inch. Abigail turned, her eyes shining. Thank you. Carter swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. Don't thank me yet. You still owe me about 50 hours of labor. She laughed, the sound bright and warm. Worth it. Before Carter could reply, a car pulled into the driveway. Meredith stepped out, carrying a tray covered in foil, her cheeks pink from the cold. Abigail's grin widened. Meredith, you made it. Wouldn't miss it, Meredith said, walking up with that easy grace that made Carter's pulse skip every time. I brought cookies. Of course you did, Abigail said, taking the tray. You're officially my favorite person. Meredith laughed, then turned to Carter. This looks amazing. Not bad for a garage, Carter said, smiling. Thanks for all your help. Anytime, Meredith said softly, her eyes lingering on his. For a moment, the world narrowed to that look, the warmth in her gaze, the quiet promise in her smile. Abigail cleared her throat loudly. So, are we doing presents or staring at each other all night? Carter shot her a look, but she just grinned and started arranging cookies on the counter. Meredith chuckled, and Carter felt his heart lighten in a way it hadn't in years. They spent the evening laughing, sipping cocoa, and listening to carols crackle from an old speaker. Abigail opened her gifts. A new laptop from her mom, a set of tools from Carter for emergencies, and a framed photo of the garage mid-renovation, sawdust and all. She hugged him tight, whispering, "Best Christmas ever." Later, when Abigail disappeared upstairs to call her friends, Carter and Meredith stepped outside. Snow blanketed the yard, glittering under the moonlight. The air was cold, but Carter barely felt it. Not with Meredith standing close, her breath mingling with his in the frosty air. "You did something incredible," she said softly. "For her." Carter shrugged, his voice low. "Just wanted her to have a good start." Meredith smiled. "You gave her more than that. You gave her a home." Carter looked at her, really looked, and felt the truth settle deep in his chest. He wanted more than sawdust and blueprints. He wanted this, her laughter, her warmth, the way she made winter feel like spring. Before he could second-guess himself, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled into his, steady and sure. And under the quiet snowfall, with Christmas lights glowing behind them, Carter realized something. Life wasn't about perfect plans. It was about moments like this, unexpected, messy, beautiful. Moments that felt like home. Chapter 11. Christmas morning and quiet promises. The world outside was hushed under a blanket of snow, the kind of stillness that only Christmas morning could bring. Carter stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, the scent mingling with cinnamon rolls warming in the oven. Abigail's laughter drifted from the garage, her garage, where she was already arranging books on her new shelves like a queen settling into her castle. Meredith stepped in from the living room, her sweater soft and her smile softer. "Smells amazing," she said, accepting the mug Carter offered. "Best I could do," Carter said, grinning. "Don't expect gourmet. Coffee and cinnamon rolls? That's gourmet enough," Meredith said, taking a sip. Her eyes lingered on him, warm and steady, and Carter felt that quiet certainty again, the one that had been growing since the hardware store, since the snowstorm, since the first time she laughed at his terrible joke. Abigail appeared in the doorway, her cheeks flushed from excitement. "Dad, you have to come see. It looks perfect." Carter chuckled. "Give me a minute." "Nope," Abigail said, grabbing his arm. "Now, Meredith, you too." They followed her across the frosted driveway to the garage, where twinkling lights framed the windows and a tiny wreath hung on the door. Inside, the space was transformed, warm, bright, alive. Abigail had set up her desk. Her bed was made with a plaid comforter, and a small tree glittered in the corner. It wasn't just a room. It was a beginning. "Well?" Abigail asked, her eyes shining. Carter swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Kid, it's perfect." Abigail hugged him fiercely, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Thank you." He held her close, feeling the weight of 18 years, the scraped knees, the late-night talks, the quiet dinners, and the bittersweet truth that she was stepping into her own life now. Not away from him, but forward. And that was exactly how it should be. When Abigail darted off to snap pictures for her friends, Carter turned to Meredith. She was standing by the window, watching snowflakes drift past the glass, her expression soft. "You did something incredible," she said quietly. "For her." Carter shrugged, his voice low. "Just wanted her to have a good start." Meredith's gaze met his, steady and sure. "You gave her more than that. You gave her freedom." Carter felt something shift inside him. A door opening, a light spilling through. He stepped closer, his heart thudding like a hammer against wood. "Meredith." She smiled, and in that smile was everything he'd been afraid to hope for. Warmth, trust, the promise of something new. When he reached for her hand, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers curled into his, strong and certain. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and endless, as if the world itself was blessing this moment. A carpenter, a woman who believed in bold colors, and a girl stepping into her future. Christmas wasn't just a holiday this year. It was a beginning. Chapter 12. A toast to tomorrow. The last day of December arrived draped in silver frost, the kind that made rooftops sparkle like sugar. Carter stood on the porch of his ranch-style home, watching Abigail string lights across the garage door. Her laughter floated through the crisp air, mingling with the distant sound of church bells and the promise of a new year. Inside, the house smelled of slow-cooked stew and fresh bread, comfort in edible form. Meredith was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming softly as she chopped vegetables. Carter leaned against the doorway, taking in the scene, her hair catching the glow of the pendant light, her easy grace as she moved. Felt, right, like she belonged here. "You're staring," Meredith said without looking up, her voice teasing. "Just making sure you're not burning my carrots," Carter said, grinning. She laughed. tossing him a glance over her shoulder. Your carrots are safe. Abigail burst in, cheeks pink from the cold. Lights are up. The garage looks amazing. Your place looks amazing, Carter corrected, ruffling her hair. Abigail beamed. Best New Year's ever. Later, as dusk settled and snow began to fall in lazy spirals, they gathered in the living room. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows that danced like old friends. Abigail curled up on the couch with a mug of cocoa, scrolling through photos of her new space. Meredith sat beside Carter, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her shoulder against his. The clock ticked toward midnight, each second a quiet drumbeat of change. Carter glanced at Meredith, his heart thudding like it had the night of the party, the night of the snowstorm, every moment since. He wasn't a man of grand speeches, never had been, but tonight felt like a night for truth. I've been thinking, he said softly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. About plans. Meredith turned, her eyes steady. Plans? Yeah, Carter said, his fingers brushing hers. I spent months planning that garage. Every nail, every board. But the best things this year? They weren't planned. Her smile was slow, warm, like sunrise breaking over snow. Sometimes the best things aren't. Carter took a breath, the weight of years and second chances settling into something simple, something sure. I'd like to see where this goes, he said. You and me. Meredith's fingers curled into his, firm and certain. Me too. The clock struck midnight, and Abigail whooped, raising her mug like a toast. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Carter echoed, his voice steady now, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Outside, fireworks bloomed against the winter sky, painting it in colors bold and bright, like teal on a kitchen wall, like hope on a carpenter's heart. And as Carter held Meredith's hand, watching sparks scatter across the night, he knew this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, a blueprint for something beautiful, built not from plans, but from moments that mattered. Chapter 13. Epilogue. 1 year later, the first snow of December drifted lazily across the yard, settling on rooftops like powdered sugar. Carter stood in the driveway, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, watching Abigail wrestle a box of textbooks into her car. Her hair was longer now, her confidence sharper, her laughter still bright as ever. Need a hand? Carter called. I've got it, Abigail said, grinning as she slammed the trunk shut. Independent woman, remember? Right, Carter said, smiling. Just don't forget where the toolbox is. She rolled her eyes. Dad, I fixed 2 leaky faucets and rewired a lamp. I'm practically a pro. Practically, Carter said, chuckling. Drive safe. Abigail hugged him tight, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Love you. Love you too, kid, he said, his throat tightening as he watched her climb into the car. She waved once, then disappeared down the snowy road, her future stretching wide and bright. Carter turned toward the garage, her garage, now a cozy little home she'd claimed as her own. The wreath on the door was new, the lights twinkling like tiny stars. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a story, a memory, a promise fulfilled. Inside the house, Meredith was setting mugs of cocoa on the table, her laughter floating through the warm kitchen. She looked up as Carter stepped in, her smile soft and steady, the kind of smile that made winter feel like spring. How's our college girl? Meredith asked. Ready to conquer the world, Carter said, slipping off his jacket. Thanks to a little garage magic. Meredith crossed the room, her hand finding his with easy certainty. And thanks to you. Carter squeezed her fingers, feeling that quiet truth settle deep. Life wasn't about perfect plans. It was about building something real, one board, one laugh, one unexpected moment at a time. Outside, snow kept falling, soft and endless, as if the world itself was blessing this new chapter. A carpenter, a woman who believed in bold colors, and a girl who'd learned how to stand on her own. Christmas lights glowed in the windows, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed. Carter lifted his mug in a quiet toast. To beginnings, he said. Meredith smiled, her eyes bright. To everything. And as they stood together in the warm glow of home, Carter knew this wasn't just an ending. It was the start of something beautiful. A life built not from blueprints, but from love.